One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Y'all, nothing excites me more than talking about podcasting. I've had some people tell me, like, Crystal, you really light up when you talk about it. So that's how I know that you're totally into this podcasting stuff. And it just makes me laugh, and it makes me a little embarrassed. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, they think I'm a total nerd. I'm the biggest dork alive who is obsessed with podcasting. But it's true. And that is what, it's just the thing that lights me up so much. And I wanted to let you know that Profit Podcasting is going to be opening again for the last time in 2019 at the end of November. So if you want to be around this energy, I can't even tell you how much I get excited every single day. I hit the ground and I just think, I'm so blessed to talk about podcasting and teach other people about podcasting. If you want some of that energy, then I encourage you to join the waitlist for Profit Podcasting. You can find all the information and what the course is all about at profitpodcasting.com. And I encourage you to join the waitlist because this is going to be the last time the doors open in 2019. And I encourage you to grab your spot because this is it, guys, for 2019. So I want you to jump in. We have so many fun things in store. And if starting a podcast in 2020 is on your to-do list, you need to be in Profit Podcasting. So join the waitlist and I will see you there. Oh my goodness. I don't want to sound dramatic, but today's episode could possibly change your life. Okay, yeah, I know. That was super dramatic. That was not delivered very well, but it's so true. The only reason why I say that is because if I would have had this information when I was just starting my podcast, man, I don't even know where we would be today. Because today I'm sharing with you my brand spanking new tool, the ultimate podcast checklist. And I hope that you think it is as cool as it sounds, because it is. And I just love the word ultimate, like the ultimate podcast checklist. I obviously can't make my voice go lower, but anyway, I'm sharing with you the ultimate podcast checklist, and I cannot wait to share with you all of the amazing things. Like, this is going to be so much fun. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Because if you've been thinking about creating a podcast for a while, well, I'm so glad you found this show. Think of this as the shortcut / time-saving version of searching Google and YouTube for hours and hours trying to figure out the world of podcasting. Trust me, as a busy mama of 3, I get it. You don't have a lot of time to be spent, or wasted, I should say, searching the web, trying to find all the right ideas and all the amazing things that are out there, and you just end up overwhelmed. Trust me, I've been there, done that, took home the souvenir. But this podcast is going to help you in practical ways, because twice a week we'll be delivering episodes that are going to give you steps to help you create a podcast your audience can't wait to listen to. So let's get right to it, shall we? So, like I said in the beginning, which was so dramatic, but 100% true, today's episode could possibly change your life. And again, I said this last time in the last episode, but I appreciate Starbucks gift cards. Okay? So if you would like to send me one after you listen to this, I will gladly send you a DM and tell you exactly where you can send that gift card, because I will happily accept it. But I'm always trying to think of ways that I can help out the version of me who was totally lost at the beginning of this podcasting journey. And one question that I see all the time, I always tell you all about the questions I see in all the communities online, is what are all the steps it takes to create a single podcast episode? And the ultimate podcast checklist, again, I feel like I need like the ultimate podcast checklist. Like, I need to add in some echo and super cool special effects, which I'm not all about that. So I'm just going to be the ultimate podcast checklist. But it's exactly the thing I wish I would have had when I first started. Now, to be fair, I have had a checklist and a system in place from my podcast even when I first started, because that is how I work best. It's how my brain works. I'm all about the checklist, all about the do this, do that, and then you get this. It's how I remember things, and I feel super dorky sometimes when I share all the behind the scenes stuff with you guys that I do for this podcast. But at the same time, checklists and workflows, or like, it's what I live and breathe. It's what helps me stay consistent more effectively, and it just makes my life easier. Y'all, I have 3 kids. My husband knows this about me. Like, we live by spreadsheets and checklists and all kinds of stuff. Like, it is just how my brain works. So today I want to share with you the ultimate podcast checklist, which is essentially version 4.0. Okay? Like, to you, like, you're getting this and it is version 1.0, but no. This is definitely version 4.0. This started as a Word document that I printed, that I think I taped it on the inside of my desk. We have this writing desk that has this drawer, and I was like, well, I don't want it to be on the desk and look, like a piece of paper that I can move around. I can lose it, but I'm going to tape it to this drawer inside the desk. And when I first started it, like whenever I first started the podcast, I would look at it before I published any of my episodes to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything. But I usually forgot a super important step. Like, it never failed. And y'all, this was only like maybe 10 or 12 things. It wasn't an exhausted list like what it is today. But checklists have kind of saved my butt. several times. And this version, this is something that I keep in my Asana project management system. And I'm sure you've heard me talk about Asana a few times now. It's a tool that I just started using in 2019. But oh my gosh, it's changed my life. But I can't necessarily share an Asana project with you very easily. So I wanted to create something to share with you that was in a PDF form, because I know it's helped me, and like getting me to the point where I am in this podcast. I really appreciate checklists and just PDFs that are really easy to consume. You can download it and then you can have it on your desktop, glance at it before you publish. You can print it off and use it for every episode. However, you could, if you want to get super fancy, oh my gosh, I just thought of this. You could laminate. Ooh, fancy. You can laminate this PDF and then write on it with a dry erase marker every time you do an episode. That way you're not, using a whole bunch of paper each time. And then you can check it off literally every time you do something. But I do this in Asana. So whatever works for you, if you're just starting out, or if you've been doing this a while, or you just want to make sure you're covering all of your bases, I promise this checklist can absolutely work for you. So I'm going to walk you through each step of the checklist because it's for both solo and podcast interviews. But I want to make sure to clear up any objections or questions that I foresee. I'm putting on the thinking cap of Crystal from May 2018 when I was just thinking, I think I want to start a podcast. Like that's the mentality I'm bringing to you today, to make sure that I can handle any objections that I thought whenever I was first starting. But if you want to go grab your own copy of the Ultimate Podcast Checklist and then follow along with me, go to crystalprofit.com/podcast checklist. It's Crystal with a K. Profit has 2 F's and 2 T's.com/podcast checklist. But there are 6 different sections that we're going to walk through in the solo podcast episode. So the first one is the pre-recording stage. So pre-recording, I could have said the planning stage is basically the same. Like pre-recording is planning. It's the exact same thing. And this is a lesson learned concept that I wish I would have known before I started my podcast. The planning and the prepping, everything that you do before you record is just as important as the recording and the promotion once everything's done. And I know a lot of people want to skip the planning and the pre-recording because it sounds so boring, but take it from me, guys. Like I'm telling you right now, having walked through the valley of the shadow of death, like the more you plan ahead and prepare before you record, the easier it is to edit and upload and promote your podcast. Y'all, honestly, I'll just be totally transparent with you. I sometimes spend an entire day planning multiple episodes of the podcast. Now, I'm not saying that you need to block off hours upon hours upon hours of time to plan 1 or 2 podcast episodes. No, you're doing it wrong if that's what you're doing. It should not take that much time, but it should take a while. And once you get further into your journey, and I'm coaching my May 2018 self right now, and I'm saying if you just start going, right? Like the point is, like we all have to start somewhere. You just get going and you start putting things into motion, then a lot of these things on these checklists, like it will become second nature. Most of the time when I go through this checklist now, I'm like, boom, 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 did it on autopilot. So just keep that in mind, that is eventually where we're getting to. But I'm telling you, now that I have these processes streamlined and I know exactly what I need to do to prepare for one of my podcast batching sessions, I can knock out a ton of the pre-recorded process in a day, in just an hour or two. Maybe not even that long. I've been able to plan lots of episodes. It just depends on the day, but just know it is possible. But here's what this looks like. I want you to choose one content topic. Do not talk about 20 different things in one podcast episode. Do not do it. If you find yourself going on multiple tangents about 10 different things in one episode, then that is 10 different episodes. Talk about one thing. If you find yourself talking for an hour and a half and you're like, I don't even really know what I talked about, then your topic is not clear enough. You need to have one specific thing that you're going really, really deep into. And here's a thought. Whenever I was first starting, the thought of breaking things into sections kind of overwhelmed me. But whenever I thought about doing series, and I've done these before where I think I did 3 or 4, whenever I did take care of your home, take care of yourself, I broke it up into 3 or 4 different episodes. It was a bunch of interviews. You can go back and listen to those at the very beginning of this podcast when it was still the rookie life, but choose one topic and stick with it. If you find yourself talking about multiple things, it needs to be multiple episodes. Then writing the outline. So I want you to write an outline for your podcast. Even if it's super simple, 5 or 6 bullet points, I want you to have an outline for every single episode. And then doing my research for SEO title and keywords. So this is something I've really been focusing on for 2019 because I wanted to up my SEO game. And if you haven't listened to it, there is a podcast. It's SEO for Podcasts, and I'm going to link to it in the show notes. Go listen to that episode to give you an idea of how all of this works and how I tell you to do it. I can't go into that in this episode because, like I said, we're talking about one topic, and it is not strictly about SEO. That is what that podcast episode is for. And then I want you to pick your freebie or your call to action or your opt-in that you're going to use within that podcast. And then I want you to pick your podcast air date. So those are all the steps that go into the pre-record phase of your podcast. And then once those are done, we move into recording. Now, the recording part is usually where people want to start. They want to just skip all the pre-record stuff. They want to show up, turn on the microphone, share their message, and be done with it. But like I said, I highly encourage you to go through the pre-recording process before you jump straight into recording. The recording part of the checklist is actually where I used to mess up the most often. I know. That should be the easiest place for a podcaster to get things right? Like, it should just turn it on, start talking, but you have to understand I'm an extremely loud person. And I know that's kind of laughable when you say it, but like my husband jokes with me. He was like, where is the volume button on you? And especially because I wake up before him. I usually have coffee before him. And then he wakes up and I start talking to him and he's like, whoa, like you're at like an 11. I need you to be at like a 2. And so I'm an extremely loud person. So when I get excited about recording and I would skip the steps of checking my equipment and my microphone, like the recording volumes, I would have wasted 30 minutes recording a podcast that I could not use because the audio sounded so bad because my voice was so loud. I was recording, so if you're in Audacity and you're familiar with Audacity, you can adjust the microphone input like setting. Mine was at like a 90, and I did not know this for several episodes. It wasn't until a friend told me. She was like, Crystal, I can't listen to your podcast. It is so loud. It sounds like crap when I'm in my car. And I was like, maybe I should look into this. Now I record it like, I'm almost embarrassed to say this because this is how loud I am, but I record at like a 55, 60 because I don't want to be too loud. But now it's second nature for me to always check my recording volumes. But it took me a long time to get in the habit of making sure that everything sounded great before I started recording an entire episode. So the other steps in the recording process are check your equipment, check your mic and your recording volumes, record your episode, and then add your opt-ins or your self-sponsored ads or anything else like that while you're recording. So I have some of these that are pre-recorded that I just drop into an episode every time. Like that would be in the editing process. But if you're new to adding calls to action and opt-ins and self-sponsored ads, then you're going to record those in the recording process. And then you can think about possibly saving those, like have them as individual tracks, and then you can drop them into future episodes as you go forward. And then the last one that I have for recording is mention the link to the show notes when you're recording. So the URL. So for example, you can find the show notes for this podcast at crystalprofit.com/episode 99. You want to make sure you do that during the recording so it doesn't sound weird later when...
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
And, you're trying to add that audio, that's just kind of a weird thing. So add that to your outline. Add that as part of your outline, then make sure you say it in the recording of your episode. So the next phase is editing. Now, the editing part of the podcast checklist will become second nature, as a lot of these things will after you've been doing this for a while. You have to remember that this episode that I'm doing right now is episode 99. I've been doing this for quite some time now. But if you're just getting started and you need to know what things to add in the editing phase of your podcast, this is a great place to start. So I have an entire YouTube video that I'm going to link to in the show notes that's all about editing in Audacity. So if you're overwhelmed with the thought of editing and you have no idea where to start, you're just it makes you cringe a little bit and your eyes cross when you think about learning something new, it's okay. I'm going to walk you through how to do everything. I'm going to link to that, but edit your episode in Audacity. You can use other platforms like GarageBand, and then there's Adobe Audition, but I use Audacity, and it's what I recommend other people use just because it's pretty simple once you get the hang of some of the basic steps. But like I said, I'm going to link to that in the show notes. You can go watch that YouTube video and learn more about editing. But then I want you to adjust the track volumes if needed. What that means is if you have multiple tracks, so let's say you record the intro to your podcast, but then you have an interview and then you have your outro. Maybe those are all recorded at different volume levels. And when you listen back to the track, make sure that one of them isn't way louder or way quieter than the others. You want to make sure that everything is pretty level when it comes to the track volumes. Then I want you to add your main podcast theme, add your music, add your self-sponsored ad or anything else that's pre-recorded in the editing part. And then I want you to export everything as an MP3 or a WAV file, whichever one you use for your podcast. But editing is pretty straightforward. Like I said, that's something that you'll know how you edit your podcast once you get the hang of it. And y'all, this is just a side note. Please don't take too long editing your podcast. Do not try to edit out every single little and ah and anytime you breathe into the microphone, because remember, you are human. You are not a robot. You do not have to be robotic on your podcast. So don't spend hours editing a 30-minute episode. It should take you maybe 35 or 40 minutes to edit a 30-minute episode. If it's taking you longer than that, please message me. We have another conversation to have because you're taking way too long. Okay, the next phase is uploading your podcast to your hosting site. Now, Depending on how your hosting site is set up, this process is going to look a little bit different than what I do, but I use buzzsprout.com. And that is what I use since the very beginning. If you want to check them out, I'm going to link to them in the show notes. But y'all, they have such an amazing platform and their resources, and you can get your first 90 days for free, which is exactly why I signed up for them, because that y'all know, I've told y'all I'm cheap, I'm frugal, whatever word you want to use, but yeah, I'm cheap. And that's really what got me to try Buzzsprout from the beginning. But I have all of this checklist is related to Buzzsprout and their requirements. So if you have another host, then it may look a little bit different, but here are the things you need to know once you have your MP3 or your audio file ready to go. So you're going to upload your audio file, then add your title, your episode description, the summary, the tags, the season number, the episode number, and then you're going to check if you have explicit content, if that's relevant, like if you have a bunch of cuss words or, anything like that. You want to make sure that you have that there. Then you're going to save and update the episode, and then you're going to schedule the air date. So I'm going to do another walkthrough of how the Ultimate Podcast Checklist works on a YouTube video. But for the purposes of this, I just want to do a quick side note on scheduling your air date. I don't want you to be reactive to when your podcast needs to be published. So give yourself some margin and being able to breathe on the days when your podcast goes live. I want you to upload it at least, at the very minimum, 24 hours before it's supposed to go live, and schedule it out for the day and the time that you want it to be released. I do not want people uploading their podcast on a Tuesday if it's supposed to come out on a Tuesday. Do it Monday at midnight if you have to, but do not upload it on the day that it's supposed to go live, because all kinds of stuff can happen, y'all. I've seen Apple Podcast have lag time. I've seen Spotify do it. It just depends on what's going on with the feeds and how everything gets pushed out. But if you upload beforehand and you know the date that you want your episode to air, it's always better to upload it and schedule it before. So that's my little side note. Okay, this one is probably going to make your head spin a little bit. I'm not going to lie. If you don't have a website for your podcast, then ignore everything I'm about to say because this pertains to people that have a website or want to have a website for their podcast. So I use WordPress, and it's what I've used. Let me see. It's been a year now. It's been over a year that I switched to WordPress. I had Weebly before, and I know a lot of people that use Squarespace. So it may look a little bit different based on what kind of provider you have. But publishing your podcast episodes to a website is not a requirement. You do not have to do this. I wanted to make sure that you knew this, that it's okay. You don't have to have it in order for you to have a podcast or to have even a successful podcast. But I do encourage you to have a website because it gives people a place to find you. They can find more information about you and your podcast. And if you have products or services or a blog or YouTube, that is where you can house all of the things. But I actually did an entire episode about should I have a website for my podcast. So I'll link to that in the show notes. Again, that's crystalprofit.com/episode 99. But once I've gotten to this point in the process of the checklist, I really feel like I'm on the home stretch. And the reason why I feel this way is because I take time in the pre-recording whenever I'm doing my outlines from the very beginning to make those outlines amazing. So I feel like this part of the process almost happens on autopilot. Like I said, I currently have my website on wordpress.org, and the steps for publishing on a website may look different than what it will somewhere else. But here is exactly what I do. And there's multiple steps on the checklist for this one, but that's because I want to make sure that all these things are done correctly. And side note, I don't always do these things every single time. So, are you listening? I don't always do every single step in this process every single time. I will simply clone or copy a post instead of creating a brand new one, which is basically like working off a template each time I upload a new podcast episode. So I highly encourage you to set up some sort of template within your WordPress or wherever you're working on your website. When you put out like a blog post or something, definitely create a template that you can use, and it just makes your life so much easier. And then honestly, you guys, like behind the scenes tip, I mostly copy my outline and paste it directly in to my show notes, and that is what you see on my website. So you're getting all the insider info today. But here are the steps to publishing a podcast episode on a WordPress site. You're going to create your post, edit the title with the keywords that we talked about previously. Then I want you to change the slug, which is the crystalprofit.com / anything after that / is what people call the slug. And I changed that to my episode number. So I do episode number 99. You could just put the numbers 99, or you could put EP 99, however you want to do that. But I have just always just pick a format that you want to use and stick with it. That way it's consistent and your listeners know, oh, Crystal did an episode. Okay, that was episode 30. So that would be crystalprofit.com / episode 30, right? You just want to be consistent once you choose something for your slug and just stick with it. And then I update the widget, which is going to have the code from Buzzsprout for that individual episode. Then, like I said, I'm going to use the outline to create my show notes. I'm going to add all the relevant links to my show notes. So if I mention someone else's podcast, or if I have a guest on my show and then I need to link to their stuff, then all the relevant links go into the show notes. Then I update my post category, which could be something like podcast. If you're familiar with WordPress, you always have like a category. That way it categorizes your post on your website. I make sure the logo or the images are uploaded. I update my excerpt with the episode description. And then I update my focus phrase. So this is where you get into the SEO stuff. So I use the tool Yoast SEO plugin for WordPress. So I told y'all about the SEO for podcast episode. Go check that out and it'll tell you all about Yoast. That's what the rest of these are for. I can tell you about them, but they won't make sense right now. So go to the SEO for podcasts and you'll understand what Yoast is and learn more about it. It's the number one tool I recommend. Anybody that has a WordPress site, you need to have Yoast on it because it will help you with your SEO. But after I do all the Yoast stuff, I set my air date. Like I said, schedule something before your episode goes live and put it for whatever time. It could be the exact same time that your podcast goes live. It could be before, it could be after, but just make sure it's on the same date that your podcast goes live. So that's what I have for publishing it to a WordPress site. The final part of this checklist, and I know this is a long episode. We're going through some stuff today, but I wanted to make sure that if you were sitting down looking at this, you knew exactly what I was talking about, and I wanted to just answer the questions that you had before you had them. But we're talking about promoting your podcast, marketing your podcast. This is one of my favorite subjects and one of those I kind of cringe a little bit because I see people do this really well and I see them do it really badly. And then I see people who don't do this at all because they feel like it's overwhelming. But I can tell you right now that the promotion part of your podcast gets 10,000 times easier if you just work it into, like, it's just part of the process. It's not an afterthought. It is something that you plan out and you do before your podcast actually goes live. And it gets fun. It gets fun whenever you have a handle on it and you're not overwhelmed by it. Oh my gosh, I think that's what happens is most people just get overwhelmed with the thought of marketing their podcast. So I want you to take this checklist and think about the places where you can show up online and market your podcast and then just get after it. Get after it. Like, you can take the time to properly plan and strategically create outlines for your podcast If you take the time to do that in the pre-recording phase, then the promotion part is easy. Here's like another behind the scenes thing. I use information from other steps in the process in order to promote my podcast episodes. That's like a trade secret, right? I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel with what I put out on social media. This is literally the information that you can find in my hosting site episode description. So if you were to go to Buzzsprout right now for this episode and look at my episode description, you will notice that is the exact same thing I put out on all of my social media posts. Boom. Mic drop. I could walk away right now, but I'm not going to because we have a few other things to cover. But don't make it harder than it has to be, y'all. You can repurpose content that you use in other places to help promote your podcast. Ooh, I told y'all I prefer Starbucks gift cards. That is what you can send me, or just coffee. I take coffee beans too. I would love to be paid in coffee beans, but okay, let's keep going. There are other tips and strategies that I have about marketing your podcast that you can find in the episodes that are linked in the show notes. So I have all the social media marketing, all the tips and strategies there. But here's the checklist that I stick to whenever I put out a brand new podcast episode. I create a video soundbite and a graphic. And then you can look at the checklist and see that I have Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, like all these other places. And I do different types of posts for different platforms. I try to stick to what that platform prefers and how it performs better. But like I said, go to the marketing episodes for all the social media stuff. That way you can see exactly how I do this. But the checklist is just to make sure that on the day an episode goes live, I can check that ticker box. Like, oh, I did that. I did this. And then so once we get past social media, I want you to add the show notes link. So today, crystalprof.com/episode 99 to your email newsletter. And then I promote 5 images on Pinterest. And I gotta be honest with y'all, my Pinterest game is not always on point, okay? I have this on here because I'm challenging myself. You need to promote your stuff on Pinterest, but it doesn't always happen. So to see the version of this or to see the full version and the interview section, because if I went over the interviews as well, we would be here for hours. But go grab this checklist. So it's crystalprofit.com/podcast checklist. It's basically the same thing for interviews. It's just a few more steps that have to do with the pre-interview, the actual interview, and then the post-interview. So I know it's a lot of information. I kind of warned you at the beginning. It's going to be a little overwhelming and maybe even confusing if you're just getting started. But I encourage you to use the bits and pieces of this that make sense to you. And maybe even create your own version that's simpler if you need it. If you don't have a website, if you don't want to have a website, then that's fine. Create your own version of this that doesn't include all the website stuff. But please just don't show up and hope that things work out every single week, because you're going to get burned out. You're still going to feel overwhelmed, and it just takes all the fun out of podcasting. And y'all know I want y'all to be a lot happier, more efficient, and be excited to podcast. And you will be when you have a process in place for success. So that does it for this episode. If this is your first time tuning in, I'd love for you to subscribe and hear what other fun things we'll be talking about in the next few weeks. Be sure to sign up for the free 5-day podcast bootcamp and check out the other great resources we have in the resource library. And of course, the show notes are at crystalprofit.com/episode 99. And keep it up. We all have to start somewhere.
Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal, it could be totally anonymous, or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message, and I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of fan mail shout outs.